a very important speaker, which is Professor D. Rajasekhar. He's a professor, HAG professor, HAG professor at the Center for Decentralization and Development at the Institute for Social and Economic Change. Of course, Rajasekhar is popularly called Durgam. He is a very good friend of ours. He's actually an very distinguished old student of CDS. He did both his MPhil and PhD work here. And he is very much remembered for being a very hard-working, systematic researcher. And I remember that even his MPhil thesis was published as a monograph. And Professor Rajasekhar has a very impressive list of publications, and I will come to some of his more recent publications now. Let me give some little statistics on his publications. He has about 26 books and monographs and 91 papers in various journals and also as book chapters. And he's one of the most recent book that he has written actually on cooperatives and social innovation experience from the Asian Pacific region, which is published by Springer in 2020. Okay. And he has a very large number of journal article collection. And I must say that he's perhaps the only CDS alumni to have a journal article in the Economic Journal, which is very prestigious. And that was last year in 2019. It is titled Motivating Knowledge Agents Can Incentive Pay Overcome Social Distance. This was published in the Economic Journal in 2019. He also won the Sanjay Lal Prize. You know, Sanjay Lal is was a professor at Oxford University, and his personal collection is available in the CDS library. You know, and so Dr. Rajasekhar was awarded the Sanjay Lal Prize for the best paper in the journal Oxford Development Studies. Okay. And as I said, currently he's at the Center for Decentralization and Development. Now he's going to talk to us about a very important aspect of the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, okay, which is the largest employment program anywhere in the world. And in fact, his systematic field research in Karnataka, I think that's what he's going to present. It's titled very interestingly, Talking to Ghosts, Exploring Forced Employment Records in NREGS. As you know, there has been a certain amount of complaints about the way in which the NREGS has been actually implemented at the state level. So I think Professor Rajashekhar's lecture will give us much more interesting insights into its actual implementation at the rural areas in Karnataka. And I suppose this would also mean in the rest of India. Whatever he's saying would hold for much of the rest of India. So Durgam, a very warm welcome back to your alma mater, and we look forward to your lecture.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this very generous introduction. And so I'll, with that, I would like to start the lecture. Professor Sunil Mani, faculty of the Center for Development Studies, students, and other distinguished participants. I am honored to deliver 50th Foundation Year lecture on Talking to Ghosts, Exploring Employment Records in NREGS. On the eve of Center for Development Studies, or what we fondly call it as CDS, completion of 50 years is an important landmark in the history of an institution and signifies the contribution, commitment, and sacrifice founders, directors, both past and present, faculty, staff, and students. I congratulate the board, the director, the faculty, students, and the staff on this important occasion. As Professor Sunil Mani just now mentioned, I was a student of CDS for over 6 years in the 1980s. I would like to place on record that I am a researcher today because of solid training that I received from my teachers, who were stalwarts at that time. I just would like to mention a few of them. Professor K. Nrez, Vaidyanathan, Panikkar, T. N. Krishnan, my own supervisors G. N. Rao, Chandar Mukherjee, and K. Narayan Nair, Geeta Sen, Suripto Mandal, P. S. George, K. K. Subramanian, Thomas Isaac, Mrudul Eapen, D. Narayana, and the list goes on. I also cherish the stimulating and intellectual discussions that I have had with my friends and seniors. And then I also would like to mention a few of them. Sunil Mani, of course, he was there very much when I was a student there. Tirthankar Roy, Shakti Padi, Ram Mohan Reddy, Bose, Mihir Shah, Nata Duburi, R. Nagaraj, Keshav Das, Parelal, Shahjahan, Harilal, Joseph. If I have not mentioned any one of my teachers or friends, this is basically because they just slipped out of my mind and I may be forgiven. But it gives me immense pleasure to share my happiness of being associated with such a great institution and deliver this lecture on CDS completing 50 years of its existence. I am also happy to note that CDS is celebrating the completion of 50 years in a befitting manner by organizing academic events such as this lecture series. I am grateful to the Institute in general and Professor Sunil Mani in particular for giving me this opportunity to be part of this important institutional milestone, that is completion of 50 years. Today, I will be speaking on talking to ghosts, and then you may be thinking that I may have acquired occult powers to talk to ghosts, but the ghosts that I have talked are different. We have talked are different, and this lecture is based on research study that I am doing with two of my long-standing colleagues and researchers. One is Erlandberg, who is a professor at the University of Bristol, and my colleague, Dr. R. Manjula. In this lecture, In this lecture, I would like to explore forged employment records of NREGS with the help of primary data collected from a large number of villages in Ballari district. As Sunil just now mentioned, this is based on very large database of over 2,000 households. The main purpose of this lecture is to explore or measure embezzlement of labor budget of NREGS. The second purpose is to arrive at typology of ghost worker and short-changed households and their magnitude. It also addresses the following questions: who are ghost workers, who are exploiters, and who is exploited? There are two reasons why I chose to speak on this lecture. NREGS, as Professor Sunil Mani just now mentioned, being the largest social protection programs in the world, has considerable poverty reduction potential and also potential to mitigate problems of the poor during the pandemics like COVID-19. As some of you may recall, during the pandemic time and just soon after the lockdown, the demand for NREGS employment has shot up all over India. This basically shows that how important a program like NREGS can play in the times of crisis, such as COVID-19. Still, there are a number of implementation problems which have been highlighted by the researchers. Of them, corruption is one such problem. So this presentation is related to corruption, on which there are not many scholarly studies. Second reason why I chose to speak on this theme is that corruption is hard to measure. Until recently, the main corruption metrics or measures in use were aggregate perception-based measures, that means what kind of perception that people have, and measures based on reports bribes paid. That means basically from the viewpoint of the people. That means the measures based on how much money has been paid by people, bribe. However, these measures have got drawbacks. Perception-based measures are based on salience rather than the actual extent of corruption. They may be responsive to the ebb and flow of media campaigns or widely reported scandals, even when the scale of underlying problem remains unchanged. This presentation is related to growing literature that attempts to measure corruption at a more disaggregated level. The general thrust of these studies has been to quantify embezzled resources by comparing the amounts or quantities allocated to a particular target group with the estimates of the amounts or quantities that are actually received. So it's basically a comparison of allocations that are made to, let's say, NREGS program or something like that, how much has been received by people. One of the first authors who have done this kind of work was Reinicke and Svensson, and they have published a paper in 2004, wherein they compared the allocation of grants intended for schools in Uganda and the amounts received by the schools. The difference provided them corruption that is there. Suppose if the allocation is 100 rupees and then the schools received only 50 rupees, 50 rupees is the corruption. So that's how they have concluded. The next paper that came in the same similar paper was Olken. In his paper in 2006, he contrasted the amount of rice allocated to subsidized food program in Indonesia with the amount received by participating households. In this presentation, study labor budget of public works financed by India's National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. I will just provide a brief background on NREGS, and I will not take much time because all of you are aware of NREGS, and I will spend only the second part of the bullet point, that safeguards. And we all know that NREGS provides 100 days of guaranteed wage employment to every rural households whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work. This means the ability or willingness to do voluntary unskilled work, manual work is a critical component of this program. And suppose if employment is not provided, allowances will have to be, unemployment allowance will have to be provided. There are a number of entitlements to workers, and then I'm sure all of you are aware of these entitlements, and I don't want to spend much time on that. But an important thing is that there are equal wages paid for men as well as women. Ever since the program was introduced in 2006, and then from about 2007-8 onwards, there have been a number of studies, not only by Indian researchers, but also by the international scholars. And people have appreciated the program, they have also criticized it. And then people have seen both positive and negative impact of the program. One of the most positive impacts of this program was the kind of positive impact that it has had on real agricultural wages. In fact, we ourselves have done a paper in World Development wherein we show that NREGS has contributed 4.3% growth in real agricultural wages. So this is empirically proved, and then similar studies have also been done by other scholars. And then the program is remembered for its contribution to women's participation in wage, and then the reduction of violence in Maoist areas, and so on and so forth. But there are also criticisms on this program. The criticisms are that lack of information to the people, and then lack of participation, planning is not properly done, and so on and so forth. But corruption is also an important one, because when it comes to corruption, I think what we need to understand about one particular thing is that Indian society is stratified in economic terms, sociological, and also other various other terms. So most of the programs, they try to incorporate certain safeguards in the design of a program. In the case of NREGS, at least 4 safeguards have been introduced. The first one is providing job cards and work within 15 days of application. And this is something that we have learned from the previous programs. NREGS has introduced the safeguard that job cards should be issued free of cost without collecting any money from the people within a stipulated time limit, and the work will be provided within 15 days of workers' written or oral application. The second safeguard is electronic payment. That's crediting wages into bank account, because this is some of the earlier programs were guilty of this thing that the money was received, but then the money was not paid to the people, and then when wages were paid, certain cuts were made by the contractors and those who implemented. So an important safeguard that was introduced into NREGS is that the money or wages will be credited into the bank account of workers. The third important safeguard is numbered muster rolls. NREGS stipulates that a numbered muster roll for each work under the scheme is to be uploaded when the project is launched. The numbered muster roll is to be updated every day and should also provide details for each worker on the number of days worked, total wages paid, and the bank account number into which the amount was credited. The numbered muster roll should also be present at the work site for public view. The final safeguard that was incorporated into the design of NREGS is mandatory social audits, which will be conducted by among others, workers themselves. It's basically the responsibility of Gram Panchayats, but the workers belonging to SC, ST, and also women, they will be conducting the social audit, and then they will see to what extent amounts that were allocated were spent and utilized. Despite the incorporation of these safeguards into the NREGS design, it is widely reported that corruption does exist. And then, in fact, there have been a number of studies which the number of studies saying that the program is badly implemented outweigh the number of studies which have found some positive features of this program. So it is in this context, so we need to understand this particular problem. So that's what we are trying to do in this work. But before I do that, and then I think certain things have to be told, that is about implementation design. NREGS is implemented by Gram Panchayats at the level of village. Gram Panchayats' responsibilities include registering applicants and issuing job cards, and encouraging and accepting applications for work, providing employment to workers within the stipulated time, and undertaking planning of and then preparing shelf of projects, and implementing and overseeing NREG work sites, maintaining muster rolls, and authorizing payment and conducting social audits. But this is basically design, but in practice, this is in breach of NREG guidelines. There is often a contractor who manages the work in collusion with elected representatives or officials of the GP or with higher tiers of government. This system, the system of the contractor system, typically works on the basis of illicit kickbacks to elected leaders and officials. And there are established informal rates for approving projects, signing off on bills submitted for payment, auditing, and so on. And then we have collected some information with regard to this system of kickbacks. And then we found that 5% of the labor budget would go to the engineer who certifies the bills after measuring the work done, 10% to the elected president of GP and and other leaders, 5% to the important staff whom we call Panchayat Development Officer, and also some money, usually 500 to 1,000, to the computer operator who uploads the work details into the official website. So the system of kickbacks, this illicit kickback system, is very well entrenched, very well accepted in rural Karnataka. The emergence of ghost worker phenomenon is clearly linked to this system because of the need to finance profits for the contractor as well as kickbacks to elected and non-elected officials at the GP and higher levels. So we define a ghost worker household with respect to the work site to be a household in which at least one member is reported to have worked on the work site in the official records. Okay, so which means that in our conception, a ghost worker is one who is reported to have worked in a work site or in a sample work site. But when you track down the person and ask him whether he has worked on so-and-so work site, this person would deny having ever worked in the same work site. So just to tell this point once again, NREGS website, there will be names of the people who have worked in a particular website. You go to that particular person and then ask him whether he has worked or not worked, or if he has worked, for how many days he has worked, for how many days he has received the payment. And if the person denies that he or she has ever worked there, then which means that person is ghost worker. So it is straightforward to identify ghost worker households in our data because all surveyed households are reported to be on NREGS website as having been employed on the work in question and having received wages into their bank accounts. Therefore, any surveyed worker who has not in fact worked, there is a ghost worker with respect to that particular work site. It is safe to assume that the main purpose of over-reporting the number of workers or work days on a site is to be able to embezzle the associated wage budget. With this thing, then we'll just move on to the types of ghost workers. We identified two ways of embezzling NREGS resources meant for the poor labor-dependent households. The first one is what we call ghost workers. In this case, what happens is that there will be over-reporting of the number of days worked. Workers are employed on specific work site according to official documents, but these workers deny when tracked down and questioned. And this represents theft from the government. So the ghost worker phenomenon, it represents the theft from the government. So which means the stealing takes from the government straight away. The second type, what is called short-changed worker, it represents theft from workers. What happens here is that there is a worker and he has worked on a specific number of days. And then the specific number of days are also reported in a numbered muster roll. But the worker may not have received any payment from the implementer. It could be contractor or it could be anyone else. Or the worker may have received only part of the wage payment. So this is called short-changed. This worker is called short-changed worker. So we classify the workers into two categories. One is ghost workers. The ghost workers basically represent theft from the government. Short-changed workers who represent, or these cases constitute, theft from workers. And now, having certain important concepts, let's move to the data and methodology. Those of you who are working on NREGS, and then you all will be knowing that there is NREGS website, which provides information, very detailed information. That means job card level information on job card level information and all the way upwards to national level. It starts from job card and then work site, village, Gram Panchayat, Taluk, district, state, and then whole country. This website provides information on all works that are undertaken in a particular geographical area. And then we are interested in Gram Panchayats or the sample villages. And it also provides the dates on which these works were started, the duration of the work, and then location. And in some of the cases, even GPS location is also given. And then what is interesting is that the information that is provided by website is that number and identities of workers employed. So the number is basically job card number, and identities, in some cases even photographs of workers are also entered or uploaded onto NREGS website. And then finally, wages paid. So we have downloaded this kind of information for 150 villages. And then, and from them, we have randomly selected 300 work sites located in 150 villages in the same number of Gram Panchayats, all taluks of Ballari district. Ballari district is in Karnataka. For each selected work, we downloaded the information pertaining job cards from master rolls. So for each of these 300 works, and then we have downloaded the job cards, and then and we found that each job card is typically associated with single household. Then afterwards, once we have had the universe of all the job cards, and then we have randomly selected 8 job cards from each sample site. So which means 300 work sites and then multiplied by 8. So it would have been, so we have selected 2,400 job cards. And then what we did was that we tracked down and then conducted interviews with the workers or workers who were mentioned in each of these job cards about their experience on the work site. And then we found that from these households, there are some who have received all the money. That means if they have worked for X number of days, then the wages were paid for the X number of days. And then there were ghost worker households, there were short-changed households. And we have also come across fictitious households. That means those we could not really track them in villages. They only existed in records. And in such cases, we have done replacement. And then finally, from 2,400 households, because in some of them, the number of job cards was less than 8. So therefore, we ended up 2,106 households. This is the total sample size. And then these households were shown in the official records to have worked in 300 sample NREGS project in 150 villages. From this thing, how did we identify ghost workers? A ghost worker household is defined with respect to that particular work site or sample work site. From such a household, from a ghost worker household, At least one member is reported to have worked on the work site in the official records, but this worker will deny that she or he has ever worked in the same work site when somebody goes and approaches this particular person. So it is straightforward to identify ghost worker household because all surveyed households are reported on the NREG website as having worked in the sample work site and received wages into their bank accounts. So this is the critical point actually. So all these households, they were reported on NREG website, and wages were also credited into their bank accounts. If any surveyed worker has not in fact worked, then that person is a ghost worker with respect to that work site. It is also safe to assume that the main purpose of over-reporting the number of workers or work days on a site is to be able to embezzle the associated wage budget. Okay. Suppose if implementers, contractors, or those who organize the worker, if they over-report the number of workers or number of working days on a website, the main purpose of this is to basically steal this money either from the workers or from the government. But an important issue is, or important question that we need to understand or raise and then answer is that, are interviewed households truthful when asked whether they have worked on a particular site? Our identification critically depends on answer to this question. Suppose if interviewed household were not truthful, then the identification may be problematic. So therefore, we have gone into this issue a little more in depth, and then this slide and the next slide is on this important part of methodology. In principle, two types of misclassification can occur as far as the identification of ghost worker. First misclassification could be fake ghosts. Fake ghosts are those who in fact have worked, but when you approach them, they claim that they did not. In other words, they would have worked on the work site, but they claim that they did not. So these are fake ghosts. But we don't really think that the number of fake ghosts in the data is very high. In fact, the number is very low because people are unlikely to forget having worked on a particular site because we have approached these workers within 3 or 4 months after the work is completed, or even deny that they have ever worked. So we don't really think that fake ghost is really a problem. The second misclassification that can come in is missed ghosts. Missed ghosts are those who claim, when you go and approach them, they claim that they have worked, when in fact they did not. Okay. So it is missed ghosts are somewhat more plausible if there's a collusion between officials and contractors. Missed ghosts is somewhat plausible when there is a collusion with officials or contractors in over-reporting work, either as a favor or for money. We, however, found that people generally in rural India are remarkably open about illicit behavior. And this is as a faculty of CDS or students of CDS, you would also know that especially rural India, they just don't hide illicit behavior. And in this case, the illicit behavior is openly, so this kind of things are openly discussed because there are no sanctions. Nobody punishes them. Suppose if they say that they have colluded with the contractor in in the work or something like that. But in NREG design or whatever it is, there are no sanctions, no penalties have been imposed on anyone doing something of that kind. To that extent, there are some missed goals, but very few fake goals. Our estimate of ghost workers is therefore most likely to be low than too high. Having dealt with the data and other things, we'll just provide some idea about summary statistics. In our sample of 2,106, SCs and STs constituted 47%, BPL card households 76%, monthly per capita income is rupees 1,486, wage labor dependent households, their proportion was 55. Households owning landless households constituted almost 30%. Households that owned at least 2 acres of land was 51%. Female-headed households, their proportion in our sample was 12%. Gram Panchayat members or relatives, they constituted about 5%. These Gram Panchayat member or relatives are those households from which there would have been either a member currently or in the past, or relative, one of their close relatives would be either member in the current term or previous term. Self-help group households were constituted 27%. Households head, the literate household head was about 57%. The proportion of households who read newspapers regularly was 13%. And those households which voted in the most recent local election, that's the Gram Panchayat election, it was 98%. With these things present, then we'll now move on to our findings. Let me have a glass of water. First of all, this is our headline finding. How many are ghost workers? This pie chart provides overall classification. In 30% of the cases, there was no theft. So which means the wages were paid for number of days that worker has worked. The second one is that the red one is theft from the government. That is as high as 60%. And the third category is that theft from workers, that's 9.4%. So which means close to 70% of the records were forged. Or only in the case of 30% of the employment records, there was no theft. In the case of 70% of the records or 70% of this thing, there was either theft from the government, that is the largest quantity, that's 60%, or theft from workers. And as far as theft from both government as well as workers, it's a very small proportion, that's 0.3, and then missing information is about 0.7%. Now, what are the different types of embezzlement? Because that's this is basically the typology of ghost workers or short-changer households. The main types are threefold: no theft, theft from government, or theft from workers. Okay. The subtypes, the theft from government has three subtypes. One is ghost workers. Second one is the ghost workers with small payment. Third one is ghost workers with substantial payment. As far as theft from workers are concerned, you have two types. One is fully shortchanged. Second one is that partially shortchanged. In the next 7 slides, we will go over each of these categories, and we'll first conceptually understand what this type means. And then second one is that in a way, I will also explain how exactly it happens, this kind of type takes place. The third one is their magnitude in terms of the proportion of the workers. The first one is no theft. This is an intended type of NREGS. When NREGS was introduced and when the law was made, everyone was hoping that this would be the type of type that one would see in the practice. In this type, there's no embezzlement at all. So what happens here is that, this is 0 to the number of hours. Hours actually worked by a worker equal to hours claimed from the government. So that means if a person has worked for 10 days, the claim from the government is also 10 days. And the wages for 10 days were paid to the worker. So which means the worker is paid all the due wages. And this has happened, as was shown in the pie chart. In 30% of the cases, there was no theft. This is the ideal case. Now let us come to theft from government. And as was mentioned already, that there are 3 types, and we will discuss about each of these types of theft from government. And here, what you can see is that the number of days actually worked is 0. That means the cardholder has not worked at all. NREG cardholder has not worked. The number of hours actually worked is 0. But hours claimed from the government is the maximum. So whatever wages for hours reported on NREG's website were claimed from the government, by the contractor and retained. So this is what it is. So that's all shaded part is the money that has been collected by the organizers from the government and retained. So this represents an extreme case where there's no work actually been done and the entire labor budget associated with the worker is embezzled. In our sample, 42.1% of total belong to this particular category. So the labor budget in the case of 42% of the workers is completely appropriated by the organizers, and this constitutes theft from the government. Now the question is that, are they telling truth? Or what happens if they are colluding with NREG contractors and receiving money? If they were colluding, okay, it would seem more logical for them to report having worked on the sample work site and having received due wages. Because collusion means what? Because they, even if they have not worked or if they have not received payment, and they would say that we have worked and then we have received the payment. So we therefore feel that the household details were used in many cases without their knowledge to artificially inflate the labor expenditure associated with the work site. And this is further corroborated by the fact that only 34.3% surveyed household stated that they had their job card with them. Of over 2,000 sample households, only 34% of them had job cards in their possession. In the case of the rest, they were all with the GP official or contractor, and this is in breach of NREG guidelines. Guidelines specifically mention that the job cards must be in the possession of the worker. This is about the first category. The second category is, this is also theft from government, but ghost worker receiving a small payment. As you can see that as in the previous case, the number of hours worked is 0, but hours claimed from the government is whatever that is full. Like previous case, funds are collected for all the days that have been reported in the website. Suppose if although the worker has not done any work, and if it is mentioned in the website that for 10 days the person has worked, all this money will be collected by the organizer. But the crucial difference between the previous case and this case is that some part, a small part of illicit gain will be given to the worker. For what purpose? It's basically for for lending their job card to the organizers, or for going to the bank to withdraw the money and handing the whole money to the organizer or contractor. So for this purpose, a small proportion is, or small part is paid to the contractor, or to the worker, sorry. So the proportion of workers belonging to this category is 14%. The third part is that theft from government, ghost worker receiving small payment. In the third type of theft from the government, contractors do not completely rely on pure ghost workers. What happens is that for some days they work, but rest of the days they are inflated by the organizer. So which means, suppose if it is 10 days, 6 days are actually worked by 6 days are of work was actually done by the worker, and then for which the payment is made, and the remaining 4 days is an overstatement or over budgeted, and this money is collected, claimed from the government. And the proportion of workers belonging to this category is 2.4%. And now we'll move to the theft from workers, and there are two categories in this. One is the fully shortchanged worker, and here the thing is that the hours actually worked is equal to hours claimed from the government, but entire amount is kept by the organizers. What happens here is that a person would have worked for 10 days, and then in the website also the 10 days of work would have been mentioned. Wages would have been transferred to the worker's account for 10 days, but the amount has not been paid to the worker. This is fully short-changed worker household, and this represents theft from the worker. The second category is that partially short-changed workers. So the crucial difference between the previous case and this case is that in the previous case, nothing has been paid to the worker, but in this case, some part of the wages are paid to the worker, and the rest is kept by the organizer. And then about 4% of the sample workers belong to this type. Now, we would like to explain who the ghost workers are by raising the following questions. Are ghost workers men or women? Do ghost workers belong to a particular community? Are they poor or rich? Are they politically connected? Do they come from villages far from GP headquarters? Do they belong to GPs headed by men or women? Is this phenomenon associated with the total cost invested on this activity, Let us examine some of these questions. First, by presenting some qualitative evidence. No, from the case studies that we have built, and then this is the rich source that we are using in our in this study. No theft is usually associated with wage labor dependent households, whereas theft from the government or ghost workers are common in those cases where kinship relations are there between workers and the contractors or those who are implementing, or where there are patron-client relationships. In these cases, they are not even aware that some of these workers, they don't even know that they have job cards, or they would have obtained job cards and then these were kept with GP officials, contractors, and so on and so forth. Here, the voices are muted or suppressed. When protested, the contractors informed them that they were doing a favor by passing on some money, despite the fact that they have not worked on they have not done any work on the work site. But this does not mean that there was a ghost worker phenomenon, means there was nothing was done. In fact, the works were complete with the help of labor shaving machinery, such as JCBs and other things. So, but the use of labor-saving machinery means the main objective of NREGS, namely the provision of employment, has not been achieved. When it comes to theft from workers, they reported to us that they have asked the contractors for payment several times. The typical response is that bill was not honored, and then we have followed up with some of these from some of these workers for over 1 year, and we found that the payment was not made. Voices are frequently heard. They kept on complaining, and then the workers have asked for the payment. When asked for payment, two justifications were provided by the organizers or contractors. The first justification is that your remaining wages, that were over and above what we have paid, and this money was taken by those organizing and implementing the work. So which means the contractors have taken, or the second justification that was provided is this was given as a bribe to officials. And next we will look at regression analysis. And I will just explain you. The dependent variable here is a ghost worker household. And then ghost worker households, and then we have regressed this on a number of household, personnel, and other variables. The first one is that SCST, whether they belong to SCST. Second one is wage labor dependent household. So one is wage labor in agriculture or non-agriculture, 0 others. Whether they read newspapers regularly, yes or no. Whether household members have voted in the most recent election, yes or no. So the total land owned, female headed, yes or no. Household head is illiterated, 1 is illiterate, 0 is literate, log. So these are some of the variables that we have taken into account. As you can see that wage labor dependent households are unlikely to be ghost workers. Likewise, even those who read newspapers regularly. Gram Panchayat member households are also unlikely to be ghost workers, so also self-help group households. But female-headed households are more likely to be the ghost workers. This is highly significant at 1% level. And then distance to Gram Panchayat, that is also, it is also negatively associated, which means that the further villages will have lesser ghost workers as compared to Gram Panchayat headquarters. And the total cost of work is positively associated, and which means the larger the cost of a project, more will be the ghost workers. This can be explained because more money means, and they have to complete the work with labor saving machinery, and then therefore the contractors will rely on ghost workers to complete the work. And then the following, that's what we were just summarizing whatever it is mentioned, that following are unlikely to be ghost workers: wage labor dependent households, those who read newspapers regularly, households having members in Gram Panchayat, households having members in self-help group. And these are unlikely to be ghost workers. However, female-headed households are more likely to be ghost workers. And then who are exploiters, if that is the case? So female-headed households are exploited, but are others telling truth? So this is a very important issue that needs to be tackled. So we have therefore asked sample households whether they agree or disagree with the following statements. The first statement that we have posed to them, NREG benefits the poor. Agree or disagree? 36% of them have agreed. NREGS improves the village roads, 40% have agreed. NREGS provides sufficient employment, 29%. Benefits are reaped by a few influential people, in the village. This is stated by, this is agreed by as many as 57%. What we have tried to see is that the results of first and last statements were subjected to further scrutiny in this regression analysis. And here, the household which stated yes to NREGS benefits the poor, and this one is that NREGS benefits a few influential households. As you can see that the ghost workers are unlikely, they will disagree with the first statement, agree with the second statement. So which means ghost workers, wage labor dependent households, they agree that, they disagree that NREGS benefits the poor, but agree that NREGS benefits a few influential people. Whereas Gram Panchayat members' households, that means those households that consisting of Gram Panchayat members, they will agree that NREGS benefits the poor, disagree that it is benefiting only a few influential households. Other variables are somewhere in between, and reading newspaper is more close to this green categories, and then this blue ones are more close to that the statements of Gram Panchayat members. So this is in a way explained or this thing, but just to summarize, the main results from the regression analysis is that disagree, ghost worker and then wage labor dependent households disagree with first statement and agree with the second statement. Households having membership in Gram Panchayats, they agree with the first statement, that means they agree with the NREGS benefits the poor, and disagree with the second statement, namely that NREGS benefits a few influential households. Households that read newspapers regularly agree only with the first statement, that it is that the program benefits the poor. The landed households and those in GPs headed by women, they agree that the NREGS benefits a few influential households. From this regression analysis, there could be three possible interpretations. The first interpretation that one can make is that Gram Panchayat members are involved in administering the scheme and embezzlement. They use ghost workers in order to inflate the wage expenditure, but clearly will not choose their own households for this purpose. The second interpretation is that whoever is administering the scheme is avoiding underpaying GP households or using them as ghost workers, perhaps because of their local influence. The third interpretation could be GP member households are simply more astute at manipulating the information given to the field investigators, and our preferred interpretation is third interpretation. And then we would like to throw more light on this in the next regression. That is, we have asked the sample households that do you agree with the statement that GP members are getting the job cards on the name of people to whom they want and obtaining the benefit of this. So this is a straightforward question, that are Gram Panchayat members involved in manipulation of muster roll records, or are they involved in forging of employment records? And the results show that ghost worker households will agree with this one. Wage labor dependent households will also agree. Those households which have voted in recent elections, they also agree. But Gram Panchayat member households will disagree with this statement. So it is very clear that Gram Panchayat member households are the ones who are capturing NREGS benefits. So these are the households which have either members or they have relatives in Gram Panchayat. So these are typically the elite, rural elite, that is political elite in rural areas, that is namely those households which have membership either in the current term or in the immediate past, or those households which have relatives in Gram Panchayat in the recent current term or in the recent past. So results thus suggest that there is a widespread opinion that Gram Panchayat member households are exploiters and contributing to the problem of ghost worker phenomenon. I conclude in this thing. We have discussed embezzlement in NREGS by focusing on ghost workers, whom we defined as workers who are reported to have taken part in the scheme, but when questioned, deny having done so. Close to 60% of interviewed households are ghost workers, representing theft from the government, and another 10% of households were shortchanged. Most of the ghost workers have been exploited for the purposes of embezzling program resources. Households associated with Gram Panchayats or self-help groups and those who read newspapers are less likely to be ghost workers, whereas female-headed households are more likely to be ghost workers. Our results suggest that the rate of embezzlement is high and that local elite, mainly Gram Panchayat members, are appropriating NREGS resources by wrongly reporting less resourceful households, such as female-headed households, to have worked under the scheme and thereby receiving considerable share of the corruption in the program. So this is what I would like to present to you today. And then thank you very much for your attention. And any questions or comments you are most welcome, because we are working on this paper and then we are trying to send the paper for publication elsewhere. And your comments and critical suggestions will be extremely useful for us to revise the paper. Over to you, Sunil.
Okay. Thank you, Rajasekhar. I think it was a very comprehensive and nice presentation on embezzlement in NREGS. Now, I think the floor is open. We have approximately 20 minutes and thereabouts to ask questions. So you could either ask a question directly to Professor Rajasekhar, or you can put it in the chat box and we will read that out for you.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Rajasekhar, for a very interesting presentation. I'm Pravina, and I work at CDS. I wanted to ask you, taking off from your last slide, the conclusion where you say that, I mean, you've said it before, that female-headed households were the most exploited, and but those who were members of self-help groups are less likely to be ghost workers. So I was just wondering about the caste profile of female-headed households. Does, irrespective of caste, are they exploited, or what is the predominant caste profile of female-headed households that you find? And in self-help groups, again, is what is the nature of the presence of different castes in self-help groups? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And what is the arrangement, Sunil? Shall I answer each question immediately, or take a few of them?
Yeah, as you please. Maybe I think you could answer each, because what we see is that people take little time to ask questions. So you may answer each separately.
Okay, that's fine. If, the female-headed households typically belong to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe and Muslim minorities. So most of them, they belong to these two categories. As far as self-help groups are concerned, this is the incidence varies. I think mostly the the dominant caste and other backward castes are in self-help groups. And then self-help groups are also typically, they have this problem of selection bias. So in the sense that although we all expect self-help groups to be consisting of the poorest or the poor women from poorer households, this is something which has not really taken place in most of the cases, basically because of the self-selection problem. And then typically, those who are in a better position to contribute their savings and those who are in a position to borrow credit from the groups, they're the people who are part of self-help groups. So because of this particular problem, then elite capture is also an important problem in self-help groups. So the self-help group composition is quite different as compared to female-headed households who typically belong to SC/ST or Muslim minorities.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, any more questions? Now, while they warm up, Rajasekhar, I would like to ask you one clarificatory question. Your pie diagram of ghost workers said that it's about approximately 60% is theft from the government.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you look at your regression results, the first regression results actually is showing that about 11% of the households, female-headed households are the most likely to be in this category. But they are only 11%. So how do you square up these numbers?
What it basically means that you're true that 60% of are ghost workers. Of them, 42% is the pure category of ghost workers. The remaining 20% almost, they receive some money. They receive some money and then, or in some cases substantial, or some cases a small part of illicit gain. Now the thing is that what it basically means that in a large proportion of female-headed households, they're the ones who are ghost workers. They're the ones who are exploited. Whereas all other categories, they are here as well as there, especially, for example, SC and STs. In some of the villages, the Gram Panchayat members themselves, they belong to SC/ST. So which means their own kinship is involved in stealing labor budget from the government. And in other cases, other backward castes are involved. In some cases, it's a dominant caste. So typically, what it means that in the case of self-help group members, SC/ST, you don't really find the kind of the larger proportion of them are not really ghost workers, or you get a mixed picture. On the other hand, in the case of wage labor dependent households, and most of them are they're completely dependent on wage labor, and they just don't allow, because for them the wage labor is very, very important, and they're all involved in wage labor. So either they come and participate in the work, and if they are given all the wages, otherwise they simply don't allow them anybody else to use their job cards or to do that. So just to answer your question, I think female-headed households, most of them are associated with the phenomenon of ghost worker as compared to other categories.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? We do have another roughly 12 minutes more.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Okay, please go ahead.
I have one clarificatory question, sir. In theft from government in the first category, where the contractors take all the money. How are they actually doing it, sir? Because the money will directly go to the workers' bank account, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how are they doing it completely without they knowing it, without workers knowing this?
Shubham, in these cases, the workers are aware. Okay, workers are aware, and then basically two situations are exploited here. One is the kinship relationship, and the first category, that is entire labor budget, is stolen from the government. In these cases, the job cards that are used, they typically belong to the relatives of contractors or relatives of Gram Panchayat members or president. So that's a kinship relationship. So second one is the patron-client relationship. So which means typically the job card holder is dependent on a contractor or the person who has organized the work. So what happens is that because of these two relationships, the sensitivity of this relationship, the workers would go to the bank, withdraw entire amount, and then hand it over to the contractor. In fact, some of the cases that when the paper is published, then you will read it. And in some of the cases, a relative of the contractor has gone to the bank, withdrew entire amount, and then gave it to her maternal uncle. And she did not ask any questions. And then she was not even aware where exactly this work was undertaken, how many people were involved in this work. And then she was not even a wage laborer. And she was basically a housewife. And then all that she did was to go to the bank and then withdraw the money and then give it. So because people have exploited these two conditions, that is one, kinship and then patron-client relationship, and this arrangement where the contractor steals the entire budget is possible. That kind of situation is possible. Are you happy with this one?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, sir. Shall I ask a question?
Please.
Sure, please.
Sir, my name is Mahesh.
Okay.
Let me add few more points currently in my village, which is related to your study as well. Because my study is saying that most of the cards are added with the electronic transfer mode. But in our village, maximum at the weekend only we are receiving money, not from the through the bank transfer, directly from the panchayat office. But what's happening there, the original amount is 250, means we are getting money only 190 rupees. So that kind of loot is happening there. So does your study, I mean, capture such things? Also, I want to one more things. For instance, if I am a laborer earlier in the NREGS, now I migrated to Kerala.
Yeah.
So my card has been used there. There may be a chance my card has been used, but I'm not working or I'm not part of the work right now. So have you captured these things? Even if you captured, where you classified actually according to your things, like ghost worker and other categories? Yes, sir. That's
Yeah.
it.
So, are you from Tamil Nadu?
Yes, sir. Of course. Yes, sir.
Yeah. See, the cash payment at the end of the week is the only this arrangement there only in Tamil Nadu. That was Jayalalitha's bargaining from the central government. So
Yes.
she got this arrangement done only for Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
And whatever you have just now mentioned, that the total amount is 250, but only 190 was paid. This is what is called short-changed worker.
Okay.
That means only the part of the payment was done, but not the entire payment. Okay. And the second, the case, it happens. It happens. It also was included in our study, where the card has been used by the contractor. So it depends on whether the migrant has brought the card along with her or him, and then not left behind with a organizer or contractor. If the card has been left behind with organizer or contractor, he may have used it, and then it may have been a ghost worker or something like that. But crucial thing is that, but afterwards, suppose if the card is there, and then what kind of subsequent arrangement was there? Whether the person who owned the card went and then received the money and paid to the contractor or not. So this is a crucial thing, a crucial part of the story depends on that. But based on that one, we cannot really say what kind of, what type is this one.
Yeah, okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir. But what I said is a practical thing is right now is happening across my village. I mean,
it does happen. It does happen.
Yeah, I mean, there is no, this transfer through, getting money from the bank account. That's not happening.
That's correct. In Tamil Nadu, it doesn't happen. All other states, it's a basically electronic transfer. Umesh Bhagat, you wanted to say something?
Is that sometimes if the government deposit directly money in their account,
yeah,
in rural area, people are not aware about that. Sometimes they don't have the time to go to the bank.
Yeah.
So sometimes the middleman, they also take more money from that labor and give less money to them. I think, do you ask about question?
Yeah, the distant location of banks and other financial institutions is a problem. Even here also. But whenever the money is transferred and then the person concerned had to go along with the contractor or someone or his associate to withdraw the money and then give it to a contractor if that is the arrangement or the deal was, or the account holder had to go to the this nearby place and then receive the money. But recently you have a new system called banking correspondent, or what's called BC, and wherein some person comes to the village and then distributes the money. That basically is the representative from the bank. But this is a new system that is developing. It's not really well entrenched or well developed. Any other question? Clarification?
I think Professor Nagaraj would like to ask.
Oh.
Nagaraj, he has raised his hand. And
okay, I will be very happy to hear him.
Yeah, I'm not able to get through to him. Let me call him and just give me 1 minute. I will.
Sure.
Just. In the meantime, if somebody else would like to ask, they could.
Sir, shall I ask a question again?
Sure, please.
Yeah, the question is, sir, does your study found any collusion? Even the magnitude in collusion between the Gram Panchayat leader and the organizers and
Yeah, you could have
the
asked.
And
Yeah.
in cheating or looting this thing.
I don't know what's.
okay.
Yeah.
Your collusion between Gram Panchayat leader and organizer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. See, the Gram Panchayat leaders, they themselves are organizers or they support an organizer.
Yeah.
Sunil, shall I go ahead or?
Yes, please go ahead because what's happening is Nagaraj is having some technical issues. He's going to put the question in the chat box and then I'll read it out.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, Mahesh, the Gram Panchayat leaders, sometimes they themselves are organizers, or sometimes they identify an organizer and then they provide support to them. So which means in some cases, Gram Panchayat leader and organizer one and the same. And in some cases, there is a perfect collusion between the organizer and the Gram Panchayat leader. But take it from me, as far as experience from Karnataka is concerned, no organizer can really survive without having some collusion, either with Gram Panchayat leader or Gram Panchayat official. So this is something which is very, very necessary. So collusion is very much essential for this kind of system to operate. Are you happy, Mahesh?
Sorry, sir.
So
I have one more doubt, sir, in this.
yeah.
So, does your study like classified or differentiate the overlapping? Here there is a overlapping, you know, like organizers, and again the Gram Panchayat leader also comes under the organization or something like.
No. Our focus was mostly on the workers, and then we have not really done that kind of analysis of where where there is a overlapping and where there is no overlapping.
Yes, sir, I understand. But what I mean actually is that when we try to assess who has more on something, like in this case, who has done more cheating money or getting these things. In that case, only I am trying to ask these questions.
Okay. I don't know. This has not been done, but we'll keep that in our mind whether something of that kind is possible. Thank you very much for this session.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question?
Nagraj has a few questions which I'm going to ask on his behalf because he seems to be having too many technical problems. Okay, what is the policy implication of this study? That's the first question.
Okay.
And so do you replace this with direct cash transfer? You know, because this is corruption, etc., and so on. Okay. And what kind of capital formation has actually taken place in the rural areas? So 3 questions.
Yeah. The policy implication.
May I just add a question to this? If I don't know if this will directly relevant to your study, but then would you be able to say anything about how things have changed over a period of time? You know, has this decreased, and is there some amount of challenging, especially through the social audit?
Yeah. I will come from the last one, I think, because that will have some bit of implication on the other thing also. Pravina, thank you very much for this particular thing that with regard to how things have changed. And see, after 2014, once this NDA government came, this program completely has been relegated to the background. In most of the states, the allocations have come down, and then the machinery which was in operation has gone into some kind of slumber. So, which means the entire implementation of apparatus that has not really worked on. So, because of which things have become worse in terms of number of days of employment and all those things. So 2014 onwards, you do see that kind of thing happening. That importance given to the program has come down. And only recently in this current year, the allocations have gone up, and then things are again looking up. And with regard to the first question, that means even during up to 2014, what has happened? Because see, it is that what the critics outnumbered the supporters as far as this program is concerned. See, the people who supported, they looked at 30% of the cases where the entire money was paid, or that means where there's no theft. The critics looked at 70% of the story. So both of them were right in their own respect, and then very little in terms of how to rectify things and how to improve things has really that kind of discussion was not taking place. And then as far as social audits are concerned, and then we ourselves have written quite a bit on social audits. But one of the important things is that the lack of state capacity. In most of the states, state either did not want to do anything with improving things, or it did not have capacity to really set things right. So because of which the social audits, the people who were in social audit committees, they were all, basically the relatives of Gram Panchayat members, relatives of, the contractors, because there is also elite capture of a different type has taken place. At least this was the story, and then in the last half a decade or so, something I have not really seen that part of it actually with regard to social audit. But then I know that social audit process has been in a way watered down. So things have not really improved in my opinion, and then more or less same kind of thing is happening. And then the capital formation has in fact taken place. In fact, most of the studies, Nrez, the budget there may have been ghost workers, there may have been short-changed households, but then some bit of the work has been done with regard to labor-saving machinery. In most of the places, the capital formation has in fact taken place, but we don't have many studies on this particular aspect. That means quality of assets that have been created in rural areas, how qualitative they are, whether they're still operational, and whether these assets have been repaired periodically or not, whether they're maintained properly or not. So this kind of studies have not taken place, but capital formation has in fact taken place. That is one thing. So with regard to the policy implication, is that at least we are trying out another experiment here, and then we want to. I like this idea of work, the payment for work, basically the public works kind of program. I like it, but then it appears that the way NREGS is being implemented, and it has resulted in more of controversies, and then less of actual impact that is taking place. That means basically in terms of quality of assets and some of these things. And then we have more. One hears stories relating to corruption and some of these things. So what perhaps can be done is that a different method or different way of implementing this employment is to be taken place, or different. So therefore, what we are now experimenting is that whether it is possible to develop a device, something like a mobile based device, wherein you combine certain educational tasks, something like literacy, something like health, education, some of these things. And then you provide this education through a mobile app, and then at the end of, so you just, all those people who are getting employment from NREGS, they can undertake this work through a mobile app, and they can spend 6 hours, 7 hours, or 8 hours, whatever may be the number of hours that are required, or number of hours that have been put in NREGS, and then get paid for that. And then, but with a mobile app, mobile-based device, one can do far better controls, and then corruption to a large extent can be in a way controlled or eliminated. And then we are, I'm very happy to inform you that we are currently exploring this policy option, the policy option of providing employment and providing some kind of social protection to workers through a mobile app, which essentially does the same kind of thing what NREGS does. But in this, in policy option that we are exploring, there will not be any capital formation, but it will be human capital formation in terms of education, in terms of health promotion, and so on and so forth. So this is the policy implication that has emerged from this study only, that has emerged, and then we are now exploring that part of it. And then I can see that your question in the chat box, that what is the evidence from your study. It's basically the primary data collected from Ballari district from 2,100 households from 150 villages. So this is basically the evidence that we are basing this paper on. Are you happy with this response, Nrez, or you have any other questions? I'll be happy if you can send some chat question through chat. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll discuss later.
Yeah. Okay, Professor Rajasekhar, I think I thank you so much for your very fine lecture. It was a very systematic analysis, and I think we have been very much benefited from your lecture. I'm sure the students also enjoyed, and we look forward to having you here in person when it's possible to do that. Okay.
Certainly.
Yeah. All the best for your further research in this area, and please do keep in touch and come back and visit us. Okay.
Certainly. Sunil, thank you very much for giving this opportunity. I really enjoyed the interaction with my alma mater. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And okay, our next lecture in the series will be on the 8th of January. Of course, there will be a seminar next Friday on the 18th when my colleague Dr. Abhilash will be giving a seminar. But the next lecture in the 50th Foundation Year series is on the 8th of January at 3:30 p.m. Thank you and have a great evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.